In the fading light of Red Hollow, a forsaken dot on the American frontier in 1892, two women stepped from the shadowed doorway of a crumbling saloon, their presence like a spark in a powder keg. Lila Voss moved first, her midnight hair cascading in loose waves, barely tamed by a frayed ribbon, catching the crimson glow of the setting sun. Her burgundy dress, tattered at the hem and clinging to her curves, seemed to whisper secrets with every step, the fabric worn thin, yet molded to her body, like a second skin. Her full lips, painted a shade too bold, parted with each slow breath, exhaling a faint mist into the cool evening air, each puff a deliberate lure. Her dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, carried a hunger that could unravel a man's resolve. Beside her, Cora Blaine leaned against the doorframe, her auburn hair pinned loosely, stray tendrils framing a face both fierce and alluring. Her blouse, faded from white to cream, was unbuttoned just enough to tease the curve of her collarbone, and the shadow beneath, daring the eye to linger. Her posture, hip-cocked, skirt rustling softly against her thighs, held a lazy confidence, like a predator toying with prey. Her green eyes glinted with amusement and challenge, and when she shifted, brushing a lock of hair from her face with a slow, deliberate hand, the motion seemed to pull the very air toward her. The saloon itself, a ramshackle heap of weathered wood, stood alone in Red Hollow, surrounded by cracked earth and sage-scented dust, the kind of place where hope came to die. The air was thick with a stillness that promised trouble, the faint tang of gunpowder lingering on the wind. Into this scene rode Elias Kane, a drifter with a face etched by loss and gray eyes dulled by years of lonely winters. His threadbare coat hung loose on a frame once strong, his boots crunching against the parched ground as he dismounted his half-starved mare. Hunger gnawed at him, 3 days since a stale biscuit, and his 3 remaining coins rattled faintly in his pocket. Elias tied his mare to a splintered post, his gaze catching on Lila and Cora. The women's presence was a jolt, their beauty a stark contrast to the desolate town, but he wasn't a young fool swayed by painted lips or inviting glances. He'd lost too much: land, pride, a life, to let desire pull him under. Lila stepped closer, her scent, jasmine laced with smoke, wrapping around him like a noose. "You look like a man running from something," she said, her voice low, honeyed, each word dripping with intent. Cora's soft laugh followed, sharp and knowing. "Ain't many come to Red Hollow unless they're desperate," she added, her green eyes locking onto his. "I'm just passing through," Elias said, his voice rough but steady, stepping back from Lila's outstretched hand. "Looking for a meal? Maybe a bed. Nothing more." His words were a shield, for himself as much as for them. These women, with their worn dresses and hungry eyes, weren't offering salvation. They were offering a trap, one he'd seen ruin men before. Lila's smile held, but a flicker of calculation crossed her eyes. Cora straightened, her playful demeanor sharpening. "Suit yourself, stranger," she said, turning back toward the saloon. "But Red Hollow's got more to offer than you think." A sharp crack split the air, a gunshot close enough to make Elias's mare rear. The saloon doors burst open, and a boy no older than 10 stumbled out, clutching a wooden toy gun. "Miss Lila! Miss Cora!" he gasped, his dirt-streaked face pale with fear. "It's Mr. Drayton! He's back, and he's got the sheriff with him!" The women's faces shifted, Lila's seductive mask hardening, Cora's eyes turning cold and focused. Elias felt the air tighten, like a storm rolling in, and knew he'd just stumbled into something far bigger than a night's rest in a dying town. If you're hooked on tales of mystery and redemption in the Wild West, Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Hit that bell to catch the next chapter of Elias Kane's journey. The gunshot's echo faded as Elias Kane stepped into the saloon, the boys' warning about Drayton and the sheriff hanging heavy. The dim room flickered under oil lamps, the air thick with stale whiskey and the lingering scents of Lila Voss and Cora Blaine. Lila moved ahead, her burgundy dress clinging to her hips, the torn hem brushing her calves, revealing flashes of skin above dusty boots. Her midnight hair swayed, catching the light like dark water, her every step a silent lure. Her dark eyes, deep and unreadable, flicked toward Elias, her breath a soft, deliberate rhythm that stirred the air. Cora followed, her auburn hair loose, framing sharp cheekbones. Her faded blouse, unbuttoned low, hinted at the curve beneath, shifting as she leaned against the bar, her posture bold, yet inviting. Her green eyes glinted with challenge, lips curling as she brushed a stray lock aside, the motion slow, almost hypnotic. "You didn't run, stranger," she said, her voice a low, warm drawl. "Most would have." Elias focused on the boy, Sammy, clutching a wooden toy gun, his wide eyes fearful. "Who's Drayton?" Elias asked, his voice rough, keeping his distance from the women's pull. Hunger gnawed at him, but he wasn't here to fall into traps. Lila's lips parted, her breath visible, her dress accentuating her form as she rested a hand on Sammy's shoulder, protective yet alluring. "Drayton owns half this town," she said, venom in her honeyed tone. "Wants this saloon, too." Cora straightened, her blouse taut, her skirt rustling against her thighs. "Sheriff's his dog," she added, her eyes locking onto Elias. "They say women can't run a place like this. Need a man's name to make it proper." Elias's chest tightened. He'd lost everything, ranch, family, to men like Drayton. But he wasn't their savior. "I just need a meal," he said, stepping back as Lila's jasmine scent closed in. "You're more than a drifter," Lila purred, her eyes holding his. "We need a shield, Elias. For us, for Sammy, for my Ellie." Before he could answer, boots thudded outside. The doors swung open, revealing a man in a tailored suit, Drayton, his greedy eyes raking over Lila's curves and Cora's defiant stance. The sheriff loomed behind, hand on his pistol, and Elias felt trouble roll in like a storm. Drayton's smirk cut through the saloon's dim haze, his eyes lingering on Lila Voss's burgundy dress, the fabric hugging her curves, its torn hem teasing the tops of her boots. Her midnight hair gleamed under the lamplight, framing a face both defiant and alluring, her breath shallow, lips parted as she faced him. Cora Blaine stood beside her, auburn hair spilling over her shoulders, her faded blouse straining slightly at the chest as she crossed her arms, her green eyes flashing with barely contained fire. Her skirt clung to her thighs, the faint rustle of fabric, a sharp contrast to the room's heavy silence. "Ladies," Drayton drawled, "you've been busy." Elias Kane stepped forward, his boots scuffing the worn floor, placing himself between the women and Drayton's predatory gaze. The sheriff's hand hovered near his pistol, but Elias kept his own hands loose, though every muscle tensed. He'd faced men like Drayton before, vultures who'd stripped his ranch bare after drought, and debt took all he had. "State your business," Elias said, his voice steady despite the hunger gnawing at his gut. Drayton's eyes narrowed, appraising him. "This saloon's a problem," he said, glancing at Lila, whose dark eyes burned with defiance, her posture accentuating the curve of her hip. "Unmarried women running a place like this? Town's got standards." Cora laughed, a low, throaty sound, her fingers brushing her auburn hair back, the motion slow, drawing Drayton's gaze. "Standards you set, Drayton," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. The sheriff spoke, his tone cold. We're here to inspect. Complaints about noise. Improper conduct. Elias saw Sammy shrink behind Lila, her hand resting on his shoulder, her jasmine scent mixing with the saloon's stale air. "Inspect all you want," Elias said, his gray eyes hard. "This place is under my protection now." Drayton's smirk faltered. "Protection," he said, eyeing Cora's defiant stance, her blouse hinting at the shadow beneath. "You got papers to back that claim, stranger?" Elias felt the weight of Lila and Cora's gazes, their proposal, a shield, a family, hanging unspoken. His past flickered. A burned-out ranch, a wife's grave, a life lost. He wasn't their savior, but their eyes held him fast. As Drayton moved toward the bar, Lila's breath caught, her dress shifting to reveal a sliver of collarbone. Cora's hand grazed Elias's arm, her touch electric. "Help us," she whispered. Outside, hooves thundered. More trouble riding in. The thunder of hooves outside the saloon snapped Elias Kane's attention from Drayton's smirk. Lila Voss stood rigid, her burgundy dress clinging to her form, the torn fabric accentuating her hips as she turned, her midnight hair catching the lamplight like a dark flame. Her dark eyes, sharp with worry, met Elias's, her breath quickening, lips parted in a way that stirred the air. Cora Blaine moved to the window, her auburn hair loose, brushing her shoulders as her faded blouse shifted, revealing the soft curve of her collarbone. Her green eyes narrowed, her posture tense yet alluring, the skirt hugging her thighs as she leaned forward. "It's Drayton's men," she said, her voice low, edged with steel. Elias's chest tightened. He'd run from his past. A ranch lost to fire, a wife buried under prairie dust, but Red Hollow was pulling him back into a fight. Drayton stepped closer, his gaze raking over Lila's curves, then Cora's defiant stance. "You're out of time, ladies," he said, his voice slick. "Sell this place, or we'll take it." Lila's jasmine scent filled the air as she faced Drayton, her hand brushing Sammy's hair, her touch protective yet sensual. "We're not selling," she said, her tone fierce, her breath a soft rhythm that belied her fear. Cora's laugh was sharp, her fingers trailing along the bar, her blouse taut as she leaned forward, her green eyes locking onto Elias. "You heard her," she said, her voice a warm challenge. "We need you, Elias." He wanted to walk away. 3 coins, a starving horse. He wasn't a hero. But Sammy's wide eyes, Lila's pleading gaze, and Cora's electric presence held him. He'd failed before, watched everything burn. Could he stand by while these women lost their home? "I'll stay," he said, the words heavy. "But no surprises. You tell me everything. Now." Lila nodded, her dress shifting to reveal a sliver of ankle, her dark eyes softening. "We need a man's name to keep this saloon," she said, her voice a low purr. "A family, for Sammy and Ellie." Cora's hand grazed his, her touch sparking. "You get a home," she added, "and a purpose." Elias felt the weight of their hope, his resolve wavering. But the saloon doors creaked, and heavy footsteps announced more of Drayton's men, their shadows looming. Elias stood taller, ready to face the storm. The saloon doors creaked as 3 of Drayton's men stormed in, boots thudding on the worn floor. Lila Voss stood tall, her burgundy dress hugging her curves, midnight hair glinting in the lamplight, dark eyes fierce, lips parted with a quick breath. Cora Blaine flanked her, auburn hair loose, faded blouse taut, green eyes blazing, skirt clinging to her hips as she shifted. "Stay back, Sammy," Cora said, her voice sharp yet warm, urging the boy behind her. Elias Kane stepped forward, shielding Lila and Cora from the men's leering stares. His gray eyes hardened, his frame tense despite hunger's bite. Drayton, pristine in his tailored suit, smirked, his gaze flicking to Lila's form, then Cora's defiant stance. "Bold move, stranger," he said. "This ain't your fight." The sheriff's hand hovered near his pistol, and the men fanned out, fingers twitching near holsters. Elias's past burned in his mind. Ranch ashes, a wife's grave, failure's weight. He had no gun, only 3 coins, but Lila's jasmine scent and Cora's fiery presence held him. "It's my fight now," he said, voice steady. Lila moved closer, her breath warm, eyes locking on his, her dress accentuating her form. "You're not alone," she whispered, her touch grazing his arm. Cora's hand brushed his sleeve, her green eyes fierce, blouse hinting at curves. "We're together," she said, her voice a low spark. Elias nodded, resolve firming. He faced Drayton. "Leave, or deal with me." Drayton's laugh was cold, but his men hesitated, sensing Elias's steel. "One day, to sign over this saloon," Drayton said, eyes lingering on Lila's lips, then Cora's hips. "Or it burns." As they retreated, Lila's hand rested on Elias's shoulder, her breath a soft lure, while Cora's gaze held his, a silent vow. The wind howled outside, and Elias felt the storm brewing. Sammy clutched his toy gun, eyes wide. "You gonna stay, Mr. Kane?" he asked. Elias's heart twisted, memories of loss warring with the boy's hope. He'd failed before, but Lila and Cora's trust, their fight, stirred something he thought dead. The saloon's walls seemed to close in, the lamplight flickering, as Elias realized protecting this makeshift family would demand more than he'd ever given. Hooves echoed again, closer now, and he knew Drayton's threat wasn't empty. Dawn broke over Red Hollow, painting the sky in hues of fire. Elias Kane stood outside the saloon, his boots planted firm, facing Drayton and 6 armed men. Lila Voss emerged, her burgundy dress clinging to her form, midnight hair catching the light, dark eyes fierce yet warm. Her breath was soft, lips parted, a silent anchor for Elias. Cora Blaine followed, auburn hair loose, blouse taut, green eyes sharp, skirt hugging her hips as she stood beside him. "We're not giving up," Cora said, her voice a low spark. Drayton's men fanned out, rifles glinting. "Last chance," Drayton sneered, eyeing Lila's curves, then Cora's stance. Elias's past, ranch lost, wife gone, surged, but he wasn't that broken man anymore. "This saloon stays," he said, voice iron stepping forward. The sheriff's hand twitched, but Elias's gray eyes held steady, his presence a wall. Lila moved closer, her jasmine scent sharp, her touch brushing his arm. "For Sammy," she whispered, her breath warm. Cora's fingers grazed his, her green eyes locking. On his "For Ellie," she added, her voice fierce. Their trust fueled him, stronger than any gun he'd sold long ago. "You're outnumbered," Drayton said, but his voice wavered as townsfolk gathered, drawn by the standoff. Elias saw their weary faces, people Drayton had bullied, and raised his voice. "This is their home. You want it? Go through me." The crowd murmured, emboldened. A woman stepped forward, then a man, their defiance growing. Drayton's men hesitated, sensing the shift. The sheriff lowered his hand. "This ain't over." Drayton spat, retreating, his men following. Lila's hand rested on Elias's shoulder, her lips close, breath soft. Cora's smile was fierce, her blouse hinting at curves as she nodded. "You did it," she said, her voice warm. That evening, Elias sat on the saloon's porch, Sammy at his side, Ellie nearby. Lila's dark eyes met his, her dress swaying, while Cora's auburn hair glowed, her touch lingering. He'd found a family, not in blood, but in choice. Red Hollow wasn't just a stop, it was home. If you're moved by tales of courage and found family in the Wild West, Subscribe for more stories like Elias's. Hit that bell for the next Frontier Saga.